The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. As Jesus was walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and his brother Andrew, casting a net into the sea. They were fishermen. He said to them, "Come after me, and I will make you fishers of men." At once they left their nets and followed him. He walked along from there and saw two other brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, mending their nets. He called them, and immediately they left their boat and their father and followed him. The Gospel of the Lord. On the mosaic that is in the back wall here, down at the bottom below the feet of Jesus, the risen Jesus, possibly depicting the ascension, we have actually 5 apostles. From the left, you have St. Andrew and St. Peter. St. Andrew is depicted with an X-shaped cross. That was how he was, according to legend, how he was put to death. And then on the right, you have St. James with a pilgrim staff and St. John with a chalice or a cup out of which a serpent is coming, if you look closely. And that represents a legend about St. John, that he was given a cup of poison to put him to death, and it didn't work. And so that's what that symbolizes. In the center, some people think that that is our Blessed Mother. To me, the iconography of the woman in the center is much more clearly Mary Magdalene, which is subject maybe for another homily, but the reason is she is the apostle to the apostles. She's the one who announced the good news of Jesus' resurrection to the rest of the apostles, who of course didn't believe her because, well, she was a woman and all that kind of stuff. But she was regarded in the early church and down to our own day in that very special characteristic, the apostle to the apostles. So I think that it's very special that Mary Magdalene is there in that image. Today is the feast, however, of St. Andrew. And we know very little about him except what's in the scriptures. The first 3 Gospels have him simply being the brother of Peter, and they were the first 2 who were called along the Sea of Galilee. St. John, however, narrates a very different story. Andrew is a disciple of John the Baptist, and John the Baptist is the one who points him out, points him in the direction of Jesus. And then Andrew goes and gets his brother Simon, whom Jesus renames as Peter. So Andrew's job in John's gospel, he is really the first of the apostles, the first one called and the first one sent to bring in somebody else, his brother Simon Peter. Now, those 2 stories seem to be a bit incompatible. We'll leave that up to God to figure out. We don't need really to figure that out. All we need to know is that Andrew is very special. He appears a couple of other times in John's gospel, but after the death and resurrection of Jesus, he seems to disappear from the scriptures, which means that the people who like things like the National Enquirer, inquiring minds want to know, they carried all kinds of legends and traditions about him. Many of them very, very fanciful. We don't need to go into that. But according to the most reliable, or at least the most often repeated legend, he, after evangelizing all around the perimeter of the the Black Sea, he ended up in Greece and was martyred in the town of Patra or Patras on the western coast of Greece, and was put to death on the cross, on an X-shaped cross, which actually was a fairly common means of torture. He was, according to the legend, he was not nailed, but tied to the cross in a very, very painful posture, but one that would not cause his death until a few days later. He survived for at least 2 days on that cross, preaching all the while. And many people were converted by his preaching while he was suffering the agony of death, the prolonged torture of 2 days. And when he finally died, he was, of course, regarded, his body was recovered and was entombed, and then, of course, all kinds of things happened that his body ended up here, there, and everywhere else, and relics of him are, kind of scattered throughout the world, places claiming his body. A key thing, a key element, and this is, I think, very relevant for us today, is that one of the legends has him being the first apostle to Byzantium, which later became Constantinople, which later became the head of the Eastern Church, what in the 11th century became the Orthodox Church. And the Patriarch of Constantinople is seen as the successor to St. Andrew, just as the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, is seen as the successor to St. Peter, his brother. And that has been the reason for the last 3 popes, John Paul II, Benedict the 16th, and Francis, on their first opportunity, their first year as Pope, went to Istanbul, now called Istanbul, what was Constantinople. You remember the song. I won't try to sing it for you, but went to Constantinople to visit the Patriarch on this day, on St. Andrew's feast day, one of the very first places that each one of them went to. That signifies how important the reunion of these 2 churches, the East and the West, how significant and important that is for the health of Christianity today. We are making slow progress. There are a lot of ill feelings behind that separation that happened in the 11th century. And a lot of wounds still need to be healed. And a lot of trust needs to be gained. But slowly, by the grace of God, and we pray today through the intercession of St. Andrew and his brother, St. Peter, that the movements towards unity, reunion of the churches, will continue and begin more and more to bear fruit.